We're thrilled to have back here from The Athletic and Fox Sports none other than Bruce Feldman. Good to see you, Bruce.
Good to see you.
Your media week tours are over. Which media tours did you
I
visit personally?
started out with Big 12 in Dallas, and then went Mountain West, Pac-12, and then Big 10 last week. Couldn't squeeze them all in.
Okay.
But I always get something out of it. It's good to see old familiar faces, but it's also really good to kind of get dialed in more on some players maybe you don't know a lot about, or some coaches you haven't talked to in the off season. And there's just been so much drama off the field, unrelated to the actual games. I just want to hear about, football and the actual games as opposed to all the other speculation and
well, that's coming.
Stuff.
That's coming. It seems, there's a new annual cycle here for college football with transfer portals and signing periods and how, when coaches may get fired and when players may transfer. It seems that we're in the portion of the year, the summer is always filled with realignment talk. It's pretty much what it is now, right?
It is, and there's always like one coaching curveball, and this year's was in the Big Ten with Pat Fitzgerald, and I think it was a big curveball to a lot of folks. But that story's still playing out. But I think you get a lot. It used to be that once the NFL could go 365 days a year with free agency and all sorts of things, never mind just the draft. Mm-hmm. College wasn't that way, but in the last 5 years, college has become almost. I don't want to say almost like that, but there's just a lot of stuff going on to deal with.
Well, we may have a free agency period in college football one day. I mean, it may actually happen, Bruce.
I think so. Now, look, it's kind of gets to the nonsense part when you start getting Congress to weigh in, and there's just a lot of stupidity that swirls around the sport. But I definitely think some of those things are going to get addressed sooner than later.
All right, so let's take it one at a time here. You mentioned Northwestern. What was the conversation at the Big Ten Media Week surrounding Northwestern, and where this is all heading, do you think?
Behind the scenes, I think was different than probably what was being had, because I think a lot of people looked at it. Nobody looks good with what's gone on at Northwestern. And when I say nobody, I mean the school looks terrible. They've had other scandals. Volleyball, they have a scandal going on with the baseball program. The AD, who's a relatively new AD, was on vacation when all this happened. The president, who's also a new president there, had come from Oregon. He does not, I think he looks like he's botched this all over the place. And then you have Pat Fitzgerald, who was, had been the head of the AFCA, the American Football Coaches Association, was one of the most respected figures in the coaching profession. Also a guy that a lot of us in the media really feel like, okay, we think Pat Fitzgerald, he's accessible, does things the right way. And then when you start to hear some of these details, I think you kind of realize it's like, okay, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes at anywhere unless you're actually behind the scenes with them. And I think it's hard to know exactly what to believe right now, because there's a lot of allegations. There's a lot of people coming forth. There's a lot of lawsuits coming out. I think, coaches, even coaches who have great respect for Pat Fitzgerald, I think they would have a hard time believing you don't know what's going on at all in your own locker room, especially if it's been going on for that long. Some of the weird, creepy stuff of these naked car wash kind of things go beyond, I think, the realm of okay, that's kind of team initiation and team bonding to okay, that's weird.
Right.
That kind of stuff. And so
then how do you keep the staff basically intact to run the ship and bring in Skip Holtz to help
the new head coach, interim head coach, who is really new to the staff, the new defensive coordinator?
Right.
I don't know. I right now I feel like Northwestern is making one stupid move after another along the way here. And look, let's be honest. This was a terrible team last year. They won one game. They've been really, really bad. They had one good season out of the last four. The other three have been horrific. So I don't think anyone looks at the expectations like, oh, even if Pat Fitzgerald was there, I think people thought it was still probably a 2 or 3 win team this year. But that doesn't mean, okay, we're just going to punt on the players and everything else is going on. I suspect now they've just commissioned another, and there's been no transparency by the way on
well, because they're a private institution,
school.
Right?
It's just like I said, nobody looks good in it, and I think in the long term, I suspect they're going to have to clean house entirely from this. I wouldn't be surprised if Pat Fitzgerald got a big settlement going forward, but I don't know how it's going to look for him. I don't think anybody. I would imagine he does not want to get deposed under oath, with this either, because there's just so many people coming out of the woodwork, and it feels like some of these issues predate him as the head coach at Northwestern.
Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports and The Athletic here on the Rich Eisen Show. All right, let's talk about my team, my guy, because it just seems that everybody's Jim's a magnet. Let's start with what's going on with the NCAA. What?
I feel like that's the easier part to handle.
Okay, so great.
We're expecting a 4-game suspension. At one point, when I had talked to folks into the winter, they thought there was a chance it could be 6 games, because I think that's what
because he denied buying the hamburgers for these
kids?
It
was because they felt like whether he had lied or misled to the NCAA. However, the NCAA's view of this is the example of it's more the cover up than the crime kind of thing. And it's coming off the heels, not connected to, but where Tennessee got a heavy fine. Tennessee had massive cheating going on Jeremy Pruitt's watch. Now, Jeremy Pruitt was a terrible coach and lost a ton of games, so they wanted to get rid of him anyway and try to get out of their buyouts. They were really forthcoming under that, and the NCAA likes when you come forward. The NCAA hated that Mike Garrett and USC kind of thumbed their noses at the NCAA back in the Reggie Bush days. And so I think the fact that, you weren't forthcoming and just kind of hat in hand, as the way it's been described to me, that's where this kind of falls in. Now, as you know, their first 4 games are against really weak opponents. And it's not like he's suspended for the first 4 weeks of the season. He's suspended for the first 4 games, meaning Jim Harbaugh can still lead the team, essentially outside of game day, so he can get them prepared. And
so what is this accomplishing? You know what I mean? Like again,
well, you have to. I think it's
look. I understand if you have committed a violation and they ask you a question and you're like making them feel stupid, they're gonna come down hard on you. I understand that, but and I fully understand how this question is going to be viewed. With NIL and everything else going on, like really? The 2 kids come on campus, he hears that they're there, he goes and buys them hamburgers?
Well, I think there was other things. It was during the COVID dead period, you have Arizona State is dealing with, there's other schools who are dealing with, sizable NCAA clouds over them because of the dead period. So I think it's more than just the one thing. Is it, oh my God, this is the worst thing in the world? No. But again, no one has ever said the NCAA system of justice makes a lot of sense. It's totally backwards.
Well, they're completely ineffectual on this NIL front right now. I mean, completely ineffectual. We're seeing Greg Sankey at the SEC Media Week. He kicked it off by basically saying, "Hey, Congress, you got to step in."
Congress.
And, then it seemed like 3 different groups of senators and
but it's a clown
represent.
Show.
That's what I'm saying. So,
you have Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn and Ole Miss head coach, is talking about now that the legislation was bipartisan. I think with Joe Manchin from West Virginia, where they were going to they had their own kind of viewpoints on this, but it was also you'd have to be 3 years at the school. Tommy Tuberville actually wasn't at Texas Tech for 3 full years. He bailed on Texas Tech's football program in the middle of an actual recruiting dinner. Like in the middle of the dinner, he bolted to go jump at the job at Cincinnati. He was not even there for 3 full years. So again, for anybody to say, "Oh, Congress, help us out." I mean, really, we need, we're going to go to people who are, as dysfunctional as you can get. I mean, that's the lifeline we're looking for.
That's what I was saying here, that it makes no sense. To me, the thing that makes complete sense is for the SEC and the Big Ten and the Big 12, and then name 2 other, if you will, power conferences, and we'll get to the Pac-12 in a second here, and come up with a group of institutions that have, remotely similar issues and questions about NIL, and then maybe underneath the construct of the college football playoff system, create a new super league where NIL is handled in a manner that is commensurate to the players' needs and rights, and also for schools that offer scholarships to the kids that they feel that they're going to get some sort of certainty out of their staying at the school, and off we go. And then that's the way it's going to go. You can't reach out to, as you point out, to an institution that that makes the NCAA look well run.
No, I agree with that, but I think the part they'd have to get to be realistic.
Please.
So NIL is right now so tied to the transfer portal. And so I did a big story with my colleague Max Olson a couple of months ago about how much tampering goes on. And a lot of it goes on where, the body that you would be talking about, which is really the power conferences, it's all, there was one example, and there's a lot of these that go on where it is the big school basically sees somebody who maybe was on their radar, but they never offered or didn't get, or maybe they just found Pro Football Focus has all these behind the paywall database information that you could find and go, oh, this guy's a guy we may want to take a look at. So you pop his film on and like, this guy could help us on the offensive line. This guy could help us as defensive back. And then all of a sudden, these conversations happen. Now, some of them happen with like power school in the SEC to bottom feeder school in the SEC. And that's, there's, the expression, there's no honor among thieves. But I think the thing that a lot of people have a big problem with is the poaching is going on. And I think if you just had the power schools saying, okay, this is how we're all on the honor system. Now, they're not going to really hold to it anyway, but it's different than if you had maybe, I don't know where you draw the line, because people are still pulling guys out of FCS football.
No, and I understand that, Bruce, and you could sit here and say, holding the line. Well, yeah, if you have a smaller group of member schools and then you have a commissioner who actually will do something and sanction somebody and have teeth to it, and the schools respect that governing body, then you won't have a coach saying,
but they have that in the let's use your example of the SEC.
They have that with Sankey.
They
already?
have Greg Sankey, yet the poaching still goes on. Like we did this story, like I said, a couple of months ago. I got a call. It was left on my voicemail from a coach I know, not that well, but a coach, as an assistant coach. It was a 2-minute voicemail telling me a story of how one of their better players, not their best player, but one of their better players basically got poached, where the player came into the coach's office the day after the regular season had ended and said, I have an offer from such and such. It was for 6 figures, relatively low 6 figures, but still 6 figures. Mm-hmm. And the assistant was like, wait a minute. You think it's legit? He goes, yeah, I think it's a legit guy. He goes, well, then you should take it. Because if they're offering that kind of money and they're not going to be able to pay it, it's like, and that happened within Greg Sankey's league.
The day after the regular season.
The day after this team's regular season ended.
You're saying, so this is, I could see the look on your face over there.
But didn't Tua's brother say he was offered $1.5 million?
1.5, yeah. Look, and there's another quarterback who did transfer, who I was told was offered even more than that by some SEC schools and didn't go to those SEC schools.
Hey, we all know at some point some kid is going to stay in college because he's going to make more money than what he's going to make in the first year
that's happening
NFL
now because
in the NFL.
One thing, and this came up in our story as well, where you have some agents who will say, before they would go, hey, come out, like maybe you'll be a 4th round pick, you get ready, you'll go higher than people think. Yeah. Now these agents will tell the player, will try to get them to transfer because they know they get a much higher commission. They can get 15 or 20% of the commission of the NIL deal that player may get in the transfer portal than what they may get as an undrafted free agent or a 6th or 7th round pick. They're not getting 15 or 20% of that.
Do we know did Sam Hartman get a big deal to go from Wake Forest to Notre Dame? Do we know about that at all?
I don't think he got anywhere near as big a deal, I don't think, as he would have gotten if he went to some other schools. Now, he's definitely getting taken care of from Notre Dame's NIL
collective. I say they're being called now.
Yeah, and I know they've tried to do that with a bunch of other, Notre Dame athletes who were, I don't think they were transfers. I just think they're part of the program. My understanding is he probably could have gotten a lot more from some other places.
By the way, I got to shoot everyone straight here. I don't have a problem with this.
Oh, I don't have a problem with it either.
Honestly, because you point out Tommy Tuberville is just like, I'm out of here. I'm leaving in the middle.
These guys have all made fortunes off of college athletes. And I'm not saying college athletes got nothing, but they are working. I don't think the average person realizes how much time and effort is spent to do what they do.
The problem I have with it is that offers are being made to the kids by people who either don't mean it, don't have it, and don't care if their word means nothing 6 months later because they could be gone. That's the issue I have is there's no protection for the kids who are being offered this stuff, and it is just shocking for the way, college athletics, certainly in football, has been run and policed, Bruce, over the last few years to hear day after SEC regular season ends, kid goes into his position coach's office and say, I got a 6-figure deal on the table from somebody else in this conference, so either match it or I'm out of here.
Right.
Like that. We had Sonny Dykes on the other day for TCU. He says kids come in his office and say, I'll come to your school if you match the offer I got from somewhere else. And it's kind of wild to hear that. My issue is who's there to make sure the offer is legit and actually is going to get paid and backed up. And these kids suddenly wind up going to 3rd, 4th, 5th school, maybe don't go to the pros. Maybe it does hurt them that they're not being an undrafted free agent, although not financially. But
when you're talking about high school kids, we did a big story on Jaden Rashada. He was a hyped high school recruit from Northern California, was getting shopped around, had an NIL agent, like a full-blown agent who was shopping him around. This guy's a lawyer in Southern California, and he ended up getting an offer for a lot of money, somewhere around $12-13 million from the University of Florida and its previous collective. And some of these collectives change and go, morph and go away and everything. And this, I don't think a lot of the NIL deals that high school kids are getting or some transfers are getting, this is not like, you see the transaction wire, you see pro sports, the deal A-Rod once got, I think, from the Texas, it's like those deals, those are legit deals. These other ones, you feel like it's written on a bar napkin that, and so I think that's a problem a lot of people have of transfers and high school recruits getting offered stuff. And then because what I think really happens is some of these agents are really trying to reset the market, because it's not like, you can go and find out, from what I understand with the NFL side, there's, what other people are getting. There's a lot more transparency.
Yes.
In college, there isn't anywhere like this. It's not like we can FOIA all these numbers. Initially, there was a college coach who told me, well, you should be able to, they talk to their compliance people. And I think this school was operating NIL in a much more modest way than most other places were doing it. But they were like, yeah, at the end of the year, you'll be able to FOIA all this and find out who's getting paid what. It's not working like that.
No Freedom of Information Act help right there. All right, so before we take a break and then talk on the other side a little bit more football, Chris, do me a favor. Look up how much Bryce Young is making this year for the Carolina Panthers. Do me that favor, because I don't have that information. It's all slotted now, as we know, and then the salary cap changes and things of that nature. Bryce Young is making...
It's a 4-year, $38 million.
Okay, do we know how much this year is?
His signing bonus is $24.6.
Okay. How much money is Caleb Williams going to make at USC this year, your best estimate?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was somewhere between $5 and $10 million.
Okay.
Now, he's got a lot of deals. He won the Heisman. He's a very high-profile guy. I don't know that for a fact at all. I'm talking about, he's got some big, legit places who are backing him endorsement-wise with the idea that, okay, he's going to be, and I actually think if Caleb could have been in this draft, he goes number one.
No, there's no, and of that there is no doubt. So trust me, I'm very happy that USC joins the Big Ten after Caleb Williams is out.
Yeah.
I'm actually a million percent happy about that. But we're just not there yet where a kid is going to be making more to stay put one extra year in college. Than
not on the
he's
front end,
be.
not if he's that caliber.
Right.
But I think like I said, there are guys who are going to probably make more NIL wise. You know, you could have
than what they'll make 2 years from now in their first season in the NFL.
Yeah, and I don't think this is the perfect example, but there could be a guy, and we'll use Blake Corum as an example.
Sure.
Where he plays a position where he's probably, even if he was 100%, didn't have the injury he just had, where he's probably not going to be the Bijan, you know, and go that high in the draft.
Yes.
Whereas if he's at a school where he is even more the marquee guy, I could see him getting not quite Caleb money, because again, I think some of that is going into long range. This is what we see. This isn't necessarily the USC collective doing this. This is, I think, Caleb's marketing team has, like, there's a bunch of places, and I would use there's another quarterback in town who is not a star quarterback, but is a super smart kid who has like 29 NIL deals, and is Chase Griffin, who's not even one of the top 3 quarterbacks at UCLA, but he's really smart, and he has learned how to leverage, and I think a lot of, like, he'll be successful at whatever he does. He's not he's on scholarship, but there are certain guys who are like, okay, it's on you, you know, you're here. You leverage what you've got. You're in Los Angeles. You can do this. I think there will be some kids who will be able to do that in a smaller market team area where it's a passionate fan base. It wouldn't surprise me if an Ohio State player could do that, because you know how big of a deal it is in the state of Ohio.
No doubt. I thought when you said that there's a quarterback in this town that's making more money off of NIL than their contract, I thought you meant Max Duggan or Stetson Bennett. Since they're both,
I mean, if Stetson had stayed, I mean, he was a 5th or 6th round pick. You know, he couldn't have stayed. He's like 30 years old.
He might start a game for the Rams this year. Best media week food delivered to the press was which conference?
Good
question. Thank you.
I don't know.
Oh, because you don't put on the feed bag? You're one of the rare members of the media that doesn't eat the food.
I'm going to give some love to the Mountain West.
Okay.
It was
it bison on the menu? Is it?
It was not. No, it was like it was in a Vegas casino. What's the Vegas casino that you have to be 21 and older? Circa.
All of them?
No. Like, they don't allow kids in the complex.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So that's where this was?
That was where that was.
So the players needed permission to appear?
Not only that, there was a couple teams who couldn't send some of their best players because they weren't 21.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I figured that would hit a nerve.
So these players couldn't appear at the Mountain West Media Day because it was held in a casino that doesn't allow
under 21.
Under 21?
Yeah.
Okay. So but they serve good food?
I thought so. I don't know. All the food's kind of the same. It's fine.
You know, there's a big to-do over what Michigan is serving their recruits. Did you see that? It was like chicken fingers, stuff like that.
I think they're all serving the same food.
I don't know. Susie's like, what's going on with your school? You know, she sent me like this photograph. It's like chicken fingers and a hot dog. It's like something that my 8-year-old would love to have.
So when I did my big recruiting book meat market a long time ago, 2006 or so, and they're in Oxford, Mississippi, and the head coach's right-hand man was like, we have, you know, some really good restaurants. A lot of the recruits do not like fancy steaks.
No.
That's like, they don't want that.
Okay.
And so they're not recruiting you. They're not recruiting you. They're not recruiting me. They're recruiting 17-year-olds. And 17-year-olds from different places.
Back here on the Rich Eisen Show Radio Network, I'm sitting at the Rich Eisen Show desk furnished by Grainger with supplies and solutions for every industry. Grainger is the right product for you. Call clickgrainger.com or just stop by. Bruce Feldman of The Athletic and Fox Sports here on the Rich Eisen Show. What is the scoop with the Pac-12 right now? Is it disintegrating before our very eyes, do you think?
It is dwindling. I think we'll see what Arizona does. I think the big issue here is what is the broadcast TV deal going to be, where we'll be able to watch it. And let's know going in that the previous commissioner, Larry Scott, had kind of bungled around with the Pac-12 network and who could see it.
Yes.
Large portions of their fans, including the ones who live here in Southern California, where, by the way, the 2 schools now are not going to be Pac-12 schools,
yes,
couldn't see it, couldn't access it, even if you wanted to. So now and we've known this for a little while, whether it was going to be Amazon or Apple, but Apple had been a legit factor in this. But then, okay, who else is going to pick it up? I think, it's a diminished brand because of no USC, no UCLA, especially the no USC part. So you're taking your flagship schools out.
And Deion's taking Colorado out.
Yeah,
too,
I mean, we can get to that in a second because, Colorado has been dreadful for most of the last 20 years.
I think I heard Dan Lanning say something like that.
Yeah,
right?
and Dan Lanning was not wrong, right? So so this year, look, my network Fox, we are going to be at Deion's first 2 games. 2 years from now, after the 2024 season, would not be surprised if Deion Sanders is not the head coach of Colorado. I just don't think he's going to be there that long. It'll either go really well. They were horrible before, so he goes from 1 win last year to maybe 4 or 5 this year, and then maybe to 8 or 9, and then I think he goes to a bigger school. Or it will not work out at all, and they will be all at odds, because I think there's a lot of stuff that has the potential to create a lot of friction there in terms of how things are running. And if it doesn't go great, then I think they go in a different direction. I just don't see Deion Sanders, all of a sudden turning into, Kirk Ferentz of Boulder and being there for 2 generations. I think if it goes well, he will get poached out of there at a place with a much better recruiting base and a place that feels like a better fit. And then all of a sudden, all right, if you're the Pac-12, and I feel like they have San Diego State on the hook right now if they want to replace Colorado. Let's hold off on Arizona or Arizona State or even Arizona State, Utah, whatever there. But if you told me it was a trade between you get San Diego State and you lose Colorado for the Pac-12, I think that's actually a win, because right now you have no schools in Southern California. San Diego State has a new stadium. They've had a strong football program. They've actually been better than Colorado has in the last 20 years. And they're much better in basketball right now, right? They were in the Final Four last year. So I think, again, it gives them the Southern California market. Colorado doesn't have deep roots in the Pac-12.
No, I
either.
think Colorado in the Big 12 is a better fit.
It is a better fit. Now, the question is, Arizona, who, by the way, has not been very good. Jetfish has done a nice job taking them from horrible to respectable, and we feel like they're going to probably take another step forward. They're recruiting well. They, from everything I've heard, have wanted to be as patient as possible with the Pac-12. And, hey, what do we got? What do we got? I don't know if their patience has run out or if they're getting jumpy, feeling like, hey, the Big 12 may only have 14, and if we don't take it and Utah swoops in, which I don't know, Utah's been very loyal, and their leadership has kind of diffused a lot of this stuff. But I think right now people are thinking all bets are off.
Is Apple coming in with a deal that appears to be subscriber-based and paying out money, something that is member schools would say, okay, we're good, or just everyone runs for the hills? Everyone expects Oregon at some point to join the Big Ten if Big Ten expands.
If Oregon and Washington, if you told me that the Pac-12, a month from now, and I'm not talking about for the 2023 season, because obviously the USC and UCLA and Colorado are going to be in this year.
Yes, sir.
But if you told me going forward that they were able to keep Utah, Washington, and Oregon, I would say, they're in pretty good shape, because those 3 schools, and certainly Washington and Oregon, are bigger football brands than anything the Big 12 has right now. No matter what.
With Texas and Oklahoma.
Well, Texas and Oklahoma are going to be gone after this year. But once they leave, those are bigger than Oklahoma State, TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech. I mean, they just are.
Is it legit to say, what does Phil Knight want?
Phil Knight desperately wants a national title before Phil Knight's not around.
That's what I'm saying. Well, we know that.
But
I'm just saying, but does he have some sort of influence as to what's going to happen?
I'm sure he has influence, certainly what Oregon's going to do. I just don't know, is there a huge difference between $31 million per school and $25 million per school? It's a big difference, but is it enough to make them go, all right, you got to go down this road here now of we're playing all our schools that are largely in the same footprint that we've known for generations, as opposed to now we're going to play in the same league where there's a team from Orlando, a team from Cincinnati, a team from Morgantown, West Virginia. But even beyond the newer schools, there's also teams, it's not that easy for them to get to Lubbock. It's not that easy for them to go to Ames. And, it's like, it's a lot further along. Like when I hear people talking, we had this discussion on our podcast earlier this week about a possible like merger between with the ACC trying to poach Washington and Oregon. I was like, look at a map. Like the furthest west school is Pitt. And you can't get further away from Seattle to University of Miami or Oregon to Tallahassee.
Is it the Pacific Coast division of the Atlantic Coast?
Like
Conference?
at least with the Big Ten, there's a lot of schools that are not on the Eastern time zone, right?
It's true.
And so
you got one in pretty much every time zone.
Yeah,
right
and you're
now.
talking about other sports. You're not just talking. This isn't just a football only thing.
I know,
right?
Yeah.
And so
sending volleyball and hoops and
it just feels like there's this wild speculation going on all over the place, and I'm not sure how much, not sanity, but how much like, okay, let's think about this. How does this really work? Because for the LA schools to go to the Big Ten is huge money. These other leagues we're talking about are fractional compared to that. And if if people sit there and think, okay, the ACC is going to add, even if they did add Washington and Oregon to what they have, there's nobody in the ACC that has the TV pull of Ohio State or Michigan.
Dude,
it's not even close.
We all know. Look, UCLA best get their fan base fired up because the Rose Bowl, the way it frequently looks, with all due respect to that program, that when Ohio State and Michigan and Wisconsin and Michigan State and Penn State come visiting, it's going to be, they're going to have, they best get their silent snap count working when they're practicing in Westwood. And that wouldn't happen, and I know I'm being biased when it comes to this, if UCLA or USC had moved to the Big 12. I mean, it's just there are fan bases that are very passionate or what have you, but I understand the move that they made. In the few minutes I have left with you here, Bruce Feldman, you were going to do a piece on Jim Harbaugh, right?
No, I was going to do a piece. The angle of the piece was,
yes,
does Michigan have enough quote-unquote talent,
yes,
as the recruiting people define it, 4 or 5-star guys to win a national title? Okay. I started working on that, talking to the Todd Blackledges, Joel Klatt, Jim Nagy, people who've really studied the roster of this team.
Okay, and that was your angle, premise, if you will, yes, going in.
Then I also asked some of the Michigan players and got with Jim Harbaugh. And
this was at the Big Ten.
This
week?
was in Indianapolis, and spent a bunch of time around the Michigan guys. I still did the piece has all of the other stuff in there, but Jim Harbaugh gave it a different headline because he was like, I bet we break their record. And they was Georgia, and they had 15 players drafted, as you know, a year and a half ago. He thinks this team will have 20 players drafted. And it's a huge number, obviously. And he kind of started rattling off the list, and some of which, Nagy, who does, the Senior Bowl and runs it, was like, yeah, we have 7 Michigan, basically senior offensive linemen who we think are definitely on our radar. Mm-hmm. And now whether all those guys get drafted or 4 of them get drafted, even if 4 of them get drafted and the rest of the guys Jim was talking about, that still breaks the record, handily.
So what was the question that elicited that answer? Do you remember? Because he also said that they can beat Georgia this year.
That was a separate. So somebody else.
Oh, separate soundbite.
So that came up like 2 months ago. There was somebody I was talking to who was connected at Michigan and told me about the beat Georgia period.
Yes, that's right.
We'd reported all about this beat Ohio period, how it changed everything when Jim Harbaugh implemented the beat Ohio State period.
But they call it beat Ohio.
Yeah, they do. I know. I had people going, they don't play Ohio. I was like, yeah, you don't understand what they do.
It's a derogatory term.
Yeah. So that got a lot of traction, that little beat Georgia period. And then, so when I saw some of these guys, Mike Sanderstill was the first guy, the defensive back that I had talked to, kind of was like, okay, this is a lot. I was like, what is it? And he said, well, it's a lot of heavy personnel. It's 12 and 13 personnel.
This is the beat Georgia period.
This is the beat Georgia period. And then when I talked to Harbaugh about it, he said, they all use the same old Ric Flair line: to be the best, you got to beat the best, and to beat the man, you got to beat the man. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And so into that, he said, I said, how is it different from the beat Ohio period? He goes, well, this is 11 on 11, not 9 on 7. And I think it's just another way to frame and focus them, which is very different from what the people inside the program had told me a few years ago, where Jim had come back from the NFL and it was almost like a nameless, faceless opponent. Now he's putting faces and devil horns pretty much on these opponents.
Well,
now.
By the way, I love it because I'll be honest with you. When I first arrived on the campus at the University of Michigan in 1986, when Jim Harbaugh was the quarterback and Jumbo Elliott was his protector, and everybody in my dorm and all the Michigan people I had met who had been Michigan Wolverine fans since they were, as Warren Sapp would say, knee-high to a jackrabbit. And I had just surfed in from New York City, started rooting for Michigan. And everybody's talking about the Rose Bowl. And we got to get to the Rose Bowl. And I thought to myself, why? I thought championships are the reason why you're doing this. Nobody, when I got to campus, honestly, it was all just beat Ohio, win the Rose Bowl. That's it. I'm like, what about the national championship? And they would kind of like blink at me like, what are you talking about? It's about the Rose Bowl. And so I kind of dig somebody who's from that era of beat Ohio, win the Rose Bowl, is now talking about the bigger prize. That's what it is in the 21st century. If you're going to go for 4- and 5-star recruits, you got to have that attitude, right? Even though Georgia folk like Brockman across the way and others are like, get out of here. Do you recall the Orange Bowl? Do you recall not making it to avenge that Orange Bowl loss last year because TCU beat you? Like, that's the response. And I kind of dig that, yeah, let's have a beat Georgia period. So what? Well,
let's I think the players he has, Sanders still is this great leader. I mean, it's funny because you look at him; he's one of the few 3-stars who are starting for them.
Yes,
and he's by all
he's a convert.
Well, but he's a smaller guy, right? And he's not very big. He's a hell of a player, and he's a really good leader. But he talked, the way I ended the story we did on The Athletic this week was him talking about we can't take anything for granted, and he kind of walked you through why, and no disrespect to TCU, but they did not prepare the way probably they know they needed to prepare, and that can't happen again. And so I think there's two things that are different that they have to hope work out. Well, one is one of those 5-star guys that they do have, J.J. McCarthy, didn't play when they played Georgia. He wasn't the starter. Cade McNamara obviously was.
Yeah.
J.J. is really, really gifted. And we saw that certainly against Ohio State when the backfield, there was almost no Blake Corum. He played, but just,
for a brief bit,
2
cup
plays.
Of coffee.
Yeah, and even though Donovan Edwards had 2 great runs, he was also playing injured in the game as well, or playing hurt. And McCarthy made big plays. And so, Jake Butt, who obviously played for Michigan but has called a couple of their games, was like,
Big Ten Network too. Yeah.
We gotta see him, in games, even though they know they're going to win, give him a chance to. So it's not just in case of break glass, we need you to be Superman. We need to see more of that because it's in him. And I think what I kind of focused in a little bit on this story was the 4 teams that have won national titles in the last dozen years with similar ranked talent, which is not like the way Georgia and Alabama and even Ohio State have recruited, that won were a dozen years ago, Auburn with Cam Newton, Florida State when they had Jameis, Clemson with Trevor Lawrence, and then Joe Burrow with LSU. They had talent, but not like the talent we're talking about these other schools. Well, what they do have in common is all 4 of those quarterbacks were elite college quarterbacks. 2 of them, Joe Burrow and Cam Newton, are the greatest college quarterbacks I've ever seen. Like, in terms of what they did. Cam Newton was Superman. That team was not very talented by the recruiting rank, by any metrics. It was Cam and Nick Fairley. And by the way, Nick Fairley was a 3-star coming out of high school. If J.J. McCarthy plays like all the people who are evaluating him think he has that talent, I do think they can win a national title because they have really good leadership. They have obviously a terrific offensive line. They have dynamic running backs. I think, they've had some of these other guys blossom. Chris Jenkins, whose dad, former NFL star, he was a 3-star guy. He was 240 pounds when he went to Michigan. He's 302. And Jim Harbaugh told me, he goes, I think he'll be a top 10 pick. He is the kind of guy that Georgia and Alabama are playing with.
That's
now, they don't have 8 of him, but they do have a few.
like Georgia and Alabama have.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it helps them that this is the year where the 3 most talented teams, quote unquote,
are starting
new quarterbacks. And 2 of them were the top of the draft. And the 3rd guy, they're going to probably build a statue of him in Athens.
That's true. Bruce, appreciate the time. Greatly appreciate it. I'd love to have you back in before the season starts and you're on a plane every single week and all that good stuff.
Every week. All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. That is Bruce Feldman. Everyone, where can people get your podcast?
Just go to the Audible and download it on anywhere you can get podcasts.
Very good. And check him out on Twitter. Brockman refuses to let me call it X.
Twitter.
Okay. And on Fox Sports and The Athletic as well. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.